What's up, poets? Fogplug here. I've been thinking about creativity a lot lately. I just wanted to say something more to the music side of what I like to do with my creativity. Providing the wind mellows out a bit, which it might not do, let alone the rain. I'm not even going to talk about that. That is ominous, grey clouds above me. I'm on a fence talking about music now. Albums, making your own albums. I've made about 50 plus albums. As I'm speaking at this video at the start of 2025, 50 plus albums. And I just wanted to say, when you make 5 or 10 plus albums, music gets so much easier. The more albums you make, the easier making an album becomes. The more music you do, the easier music is. So as a creative artist, the easiest way to grow is just to create. Make and create and enjoy it. Lock into the process, and most importantly, love the process. Every day I'm just thinking about what's going to be my next artistic project. What's my next album going to sound like? What's it going to look like? What's the artwork going to contain? What's the sounds going to be held within it? What's the storyline, if any? What's the creative musical genre direction that I'm going for? Most of them tend to be like outsider, experimental, avant-garde, wacky, zany, all that good stuff for me. So the direction is infinite and the possibilities are quite limitless. And at this point, making an album is no sweat to me because I've made 50 plus albums. I can make an album in a week, can make an album in a month, by the end of the year. Easy. Because I'm just so familiar with the process. It's a process of doing and a process of creating as much as a process of reviewing, editing and reworking and remastering and mixing, which is probably the slower part of the actual adventure itself, is editing your album, mixing it, mastering it and so forth. But I didn't come to sit on a fence in the middle of nowhere to talk about mixing your album. Come to say, the more you make, the easier it becomes. It gets easier the more hard work you put in. The artists you listen to right now, I think on average churn out 6 albums across the whole lifetime. Some even less. Maybe 8, 9, 10 albums would be seen as, wow, absolutely wild. Big things going over here. Big things going on with that. But I'm more interested in the artists who have done 40 plus albums, 50 plus albums, 60 plus albums, even 100 plus albums. That's when they really live and breathe creativity and constantly changing and adjusting your perception and your outlook and understanding of the world around you. When I think you make that many albums over a course of a lifetime, your relationship with music changes, and with your audience, suddenly it's just a measurement of you as a person going into the albums and releasing them. And that's why I think the more albums people make, the easier it becomes. You get to understand yourself more. There's a bit of an inward journey in which self-exploration, you find out more about yourself, your strengths, your weaknesses, your creativity as an artist and a musician by the more you make albums. And I know working with bands, don't even get me with orchestras and big bands, just working with bands is hard enough, just trying to get everybody free for just one album's recording session. And you'd be lucky if you get an album in the next 5 years done without any, label backing behind your budget. I know it's like expensive to do this otherwise. And I'm not going to say it's easy for a band just to churn out 10 albums just with a click of the finger. And I think that's kind of where the power as an individual, as an artist, really sinks into play and has a bit of an edge, an advantage over a band of 4, 3, 5, whatever, how many people you want to have. I think albums are more individualistic and vernacular and stylized to just yourself. It's like a pinpoint how you're feeling at that moment in time. It's how I like to review my albums looking back. Like, what was last year like? What was the year before then? I can't remember what I did that year. Let's see what albums I was working on. What's my music like? Oh, yeah, okay, very, very experimental. Well, this year it's more about mixtapes. Last year it was more about being avant-garde. Just really interesting documenting time by unleashing so many of these great albums. And it's within you to do this. Anyone can make an album in this day and age, and that would be a lovely topic for a lovely video another time. Just to work out what sound you want, what you're going for and who you are, just by physically doing albums. Is the best way to discover yourself as an artist and get presence. And to get a following, actually. To be getting that much albums out, I think that would sustain interest. And I hate saying it's all about what's next, it's all about the next move, it's all about thinking ahead with social media as an artist for your promotion and planning, but unfortunately the kind of world we live in, it does favour the artists who are very prolific. So how do you become prolific? You got to enjoy the journey, obviously. You got to see music as a way of expressing yourself and a way of learning more about yourself. When you turn it into that sort of an educational process, suddenly albums take on greater weight, hold greater value and emotions to you. And the third point I'd like to add on how to be a bit more prolific for getting 10 albums out or 5 albums out is just to enjoy the actual process of working on music more. Document it, record it, I say document it, goal set it about what you want to achieve with it, and you'll find out that you can actually do a lot more than you think if you push yourself. The first album's always the hardest, I say, particularly when you're working by yourself as a solo artist. First album's always the hardest. Second album gets a little bit easier, but it's no less better. Probably by the third album, that's when you start to improve. You're more used to the process. The fifth album, suddenly, it becomes more natural. By your 10th album, that's when things really shoot off. Suddenly, it's all easy. It's all good to manage. The process isn't quite hard to start. It's not too alien-like in its feeling upon you. It's just easy to just rock and roll with your albums once you make 10. It's like a big turning point when you get to that stage of the game. Making 10 albums, suddenly things just get easier and easier. Because at the end of the day, it's just, albums aren't more than an hour long, typically, particularly in this day and age. Spotify means it's less than half an hour, we're looking at realistically. But I think albums at half an hour to 40 minutes, no more than 50 minutes, are just the sweet point. And when you think about it, that's not a lot of tracks. That's probably no more than 20 tracks we're looking at. And that's not a long amount of time when you split the album up in half. One side is your A side and your second side, your B side. When you look at it, it's really not that hard to actually just sit down and just calculate, filling up all this soundscape of noise and ideas to go into making your album. The only way you're going to make 10 albums is just to sit down and make them. There's no other easier way. Of course, collabing would be super simple, but you can't always rely on other people, and that's it with a band, why it's difficult as a band. It's just getting people free, to get people ready for the moment, or to share ideas. It doesn't always go to plan. Just work it at your own pace, get 5 albums done, get 10 albums done, and you'll find suddenly your art, the productivity just gets rapid. From there on in, it's an easy game. You're a different artist when you make 10 albums. Suddenly you can take on the world. Albums are nothing to you, they just sound like a song. Yeah? Albums literally sound like the duration of a song once you've made 10 of them. Make 10 albums, that 40 minutes just sounds like no more than 3 minutes, and it's just like, there, it's done, it's finished. You'd be surprised how speedy these things are, yeah? Right, I'm going to leave my fence and wish all the artists well, and keep making those lovely albums. Peace.